finances. And what is interesting is the verse of scripture talks about prosper, which are you prosper in all things. But I don't know, the world goes after, prosperity in terms of finances. But the second part of it that talks about being in health, we don't pay much attention to that at all. We talk about the prosperity, but not about the health until it affects us, until something happens, and we realize how important our health is. And in this family, within recent times, we have had people who have suffered, stroke, and those that we know of, and there may be others as well. And we want to address this. We want to be in a place where we can do the right thing so that we will not destroy this temple that the Spirit of God wants to live in. So we have asked Dr. Rossi Khan to come back tonight. Of course, he's the owner and CEO, I suppose, is the position of BioLife Health. And he has shared with us before. In fact, he did a stint with us just recently on Men Talk, where he did a little series on prostate cancer, preventing prostate cancer. And it was well received. And we thank God for his ministry. And I call it ministry, even though it's about the body, it is ministry. And so we are proud to have him tonight. We are glad to have him tonight to share with us on this all-important topic. So without further ado, let me introduce to you my friend and brother, Dr. Rossi Khan. Dr. Rossi, it's over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Pastor Noel, and greetings to you and your wonderful wife, Pastor Nicole. It is a great pleasure to be with you once more, as usual. I know that we've spent some time together, quite a bit of time in recent days and recent weeks, and it really has been enjoyable for me. I hope that it's been enjoyable for all of our listeners as well at the Men Talk sessions. And of course, I've been here with you at this ministry on a Wednesday night before. And so this is not really new to us, but it really is a blessing to spend some time with you and your wonderful people. I want to greet all of the leaders that are here online as well, the elders of the ministry, and perhaps those that are listening for the first time. It's my honor to serve you in this capacity here tonight. I've been a minister of the gospel for quite some time now. And one of the things that I've noticed is that many people are quite ill. And this is quite obvious if you spend any time in the ministry with people. One of the things that you will hear all the time is, well, Pastor, pray for me because I'm not feeling well, or I have a relative that has been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z. Some time ago, I was at Daybreak Assembly, and this would have been just before COVID-19. And I recall that there was a prayer meeting and they invited persons to fill out prayer cards. And I was at the altar and I took home some of these prayer cards. Of course, they were anonymous. And I realized that there were two main requests that were always written on these cards. And I found that those two things have to do with finances and they have to do with illnesses. People are really striving to succeed in these areas and they're asking for prayer for so many different ailments that they're experiencing right now. And I think that it's really a direction that comes from God where Dr. Richards has really placed an emphasis on this very important topic, because if we don't prevent these illnesses, we're going to spend a lot of time and money and energy trying to recover. And there are people out there that are making some decisions that are really putting them in a certain direction that you don't want to be in. And so we have to be very mindful here tonight and cognizant of the principles of building health, but specifically healthy blood. There's a passage of scripture that I wrote a whole book on, and that is in Leviticus 17 and verse 11 several years ago. It says that the life of the body is in the blood. So it's not in your brain, it's not in your heart, it's not in your liver and kidneys and prostate and so forth. The life of the body is in the blood. And I refer to the blood as the foundation of one's health, because on one side of the coin, well, every part of the body is supplied by blood. That's basic science. But even deeper than this, all the cells in the body, whether it be the bone cells or the heart cells or the skin cells, or whatever the case might be, they are all made from red blood cells. I've said before that a house is only as strong as the material that is made from. And in the same way, the body is only as robust as the cells that it comprises. So if the blood is healthy, the body is going to follow suit. The body is going to be healthy as a result. So if you want to look young, if you want healthy hair and skin and nails, organs and bones, you want to feel great, you want a long, healthy life by the grace of God, you want to minimize symptomologies in your lifetime, you have to start by building healthy blood because it's foundational to human health. And these principles I've come to realize are really ones that don't come naturally to us because we have lots of things working against us. We have convenience and we have costs and we have culture. These three C's, I call them, they're all working against us on a daily basis. And so we are really trying to swim upstream. But the good news is we have the help of Almighty God. And I feel that as this program goes by, you're going to get a lot of very good information that is coming right out of our research at BioLife Healthcare. And this kind of information, if you apply it, regardless of what your color, age, or gender is, you're going to get the results you're looking for because these principles work 100% of the time across the board. Now, in our last session, I showed you a few pictures of some screenings that we do at BioLife Healthcare, and I showed you a picture of what healthy blood looks like. And we also went through some slides about what various conditions look like as well. But our goal is to get to a point where we're all experiencing what it means to have healthy blood flowing through our bodies. It's something that can be seen under a high-powered microscope. And when you examine the quality in lifetime, you will see some very interesting things. And over the last 19 years now at this company, we have been experimenting on the effects of various types of contributors as they relate to human blood. So I'm talking about the kinds of fluids that people drink, or maybe the types of exercises that they do, perhaps even the diet that they adhere to, or the supplements that they ingest. All of these things we spent a long time testing, and especially in the early years, we used to pay people to come into our lab and to ingest various materials, different meals and that kind of thing, and we take before and after pictures. So we know which ones are truly beneficial and which ones are harmful. And I think that we've compiled some very good information that I'm going to share with you tonight. In fact, just to illustrate something that I want to facilitate here tonight, I'm going to talk about 7 major principles as it pertains to preventing strokes. But I want to do this in a very systematic way because I want you to recall all the information that I'm teaching here tonight. It wouldn't make sense for you to really participate in a program like this and you don't get practical information. Sometimes we leave sessions, even church services and so forth, and we have no information to go on. We just have motivation, we feel excited, but we don't have data that we can put into practice. And so I want to encourage you to take a lot of notes here this evening because I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you as quickly as I can, and you may not remember everything I'm teaching. That's not the way your brain works. So make sure and take some notes so you can revise them and memorize them and put them into practice. And then you can teach somebody else. You know, you can't teach what you don't practice yourself. That is called hypocrisy. So make sure and get it right before you try and take this speck out of somebody else's eye. You know, I've commented on practicing principles of health before because there's so many practitioners of health, unfortunately, that don't practice what they teach. In fact, I was just seeing this to a patient this week where you have a lot of doctors out there sick today. And one of two things is happening there. Either they don't have the right information, maybe what they're teaching is not working for them, or number two is that they have the right kind of information, but they're not putting it into practice. And that's truly unfortunate. So you don't get the benefits of something that might become truly meaningful for both you and your family. So anyway, I want to get right into it. We're talking about 7 major principles towards preventing stroke. But before I just get there, let me just quickly say something that I feel is truly important for you. When it comes to stroke, when it comes to the symptoms that lead up to a stroke or a heart attack or some kind of experience that might be similar, these things don't just occur overnight. You have a lot of contributing factors that you are putting into the fray, even right now as we speak, and you may not necessarily be aware of it. And when these contributors build up to a crescendo, well, then you see an emergency state eventually arise. And that can manifest itself in a stroke, of course, but these things oftentimes are really built upon over a long period of time. Now, the thing that I worry about the most when it comes to stroke is the pressure of human blood. And I have a lot of patients that talk about high blood pressure. I have countless patients that have this kind of problem when they first come to us. And oftentimes they don't even understand that high blood pressure is not really the main problem when you have high blood pressure. The main issue is the poor circulation of blood. If blood isn't flowing properly, well, then blood pressure will increase as a result. I showed you a picture a few weeks ago where cells actually congest under a microscope, and when they stick together in groups, it makes it very difficult for them to move around freely and circulate throughout the body to deliver oxygen. So the result is the poor circulation of blood. Red blood cells have to be separate and free flowing. But because of how congested they are, it will restrict their movement. And it's not too different from the water system that you have at home. You know, if you have poor water flow, because maybe there's a blockage in the water system or whatever it might be, well, then water pressure begins to build up behind. And then, of course, if water pressure becomes too high, well, then you end up in an emergency state where you see a rupture in the pipes, so to speak. In the same way, in the human body, when you have blood pressure that is building up continually, it can come to an emergency state, and then you see the result might be a stroke. So what you are calling the main issue may not necessarily be the main issue indeed. I think what we have to do in order to normalize blood flow and therefore normalize blood pressure and reduce the risk of stroke and heart attack is to simply make sure that the cells remain decongested. The red blood cells that you see under a microscope must be suspended in their own space. And if you can keep them separate, well, then you can do a lot to maintain proper blood circulation. You can avoid the symptoms of poor circulation in the long run, which include things like headaches and cramps, irregular blood pressure, stress to the heart and lungs, general fatigue, shortness of breath, lightheadedness, increased risk of stroke. All of these are symptoms of poor circulation. And I feel that if you were to put some of these principles into practice, you're going to really get the results you're looking for. All right, the first thing that I want to encourage you to do might be a little bit unique. Perhaps you've never thought about this before, but you can do your own research on this. I'm going to mention this term, dry brush massage therapy. This is very important and it's free of charge. Anybody can do it from the privacy of their own home. Keep that in mind, dry brush massage therapy. So this is very interesting. You know, oftentimes people talk about increasing blood flow by doing massage therapies. And I think that's a wonderful thing. If you have a masseuse that is very good and they are using 10 fingers in order to facilitate the flow of blood, to increase blood flow manually, well, that can be a very wonderful and relaxing experience. But you can actually do this on your own without using 10 fingers. You can actually get a brush that has hundreds of bristles, and you can lightly brush your skin, always in an upward direction, always in the direction of your heart. So if you're going from the arms, well, you're coming this way and going to the armpits. If you go from the feet, you can go from the feet up to the legs and up to the groin. You're not brushing too harshly to irritate your skin, but you are brushing firmly enough to increase the flow of blood. Now, blood always flows in the direction of your heart, which is why I'm telling you to brush in that very specific direction. So please don't misunderstand me. You can't just brush yourself all over the place in a random way. I'm talking about using a dry brush massage therapy process in order to facilitate new blood flow, manual blood flow, always in an upward direction towards the heart. And so I think that if you were to do this, you could actually include it maybe at least 3 times a day if you want to help yourself to recover from a stroke. For those of you that are listening to this program and you've already experienced a stroke, whether it be a major one or a minor one, or perhaps several minor ones, well, one of the things you can start doing is this dry brush massage therapy. And I think that that is going to help to decongest the cells quite a bit, because you're not just using 10 fingers anymore. These bristles are so small that they can even brush and stimulate blood vessels. So I think that's a great step in the right direction. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And it's a simple thing, it's free of charge anyway. So make sure and you take advantage of the dry brush massage therapies. And even if you have not had a stroke, or you don't feel that you are at a risk for stroke, well, that's fine. You can still do the dry brush massage therapies. I think that it's a good inclusion for your exercise routine. You know, when I exercise, I do several different things. I have a mini trampoline at home, and I use this to do my aerobics, you see. So I do that for several minutes a day. And then I go outside, I take a little bit of a walk, I get some sunlight, I break a sweat, I do some stretching and deep breathing exercises. You can include all of these things in your exercise regimen. But if you include the dry brush therapies, well, I feel that's a good way to cap it off at the end so that you get that increased blood flow. And I feel that that might be an inclusion for every single person, certainly that is listening to this program, regardless of what your condition might be, it will benefit you in the long run. Now, the second thing that I really want to focus on here this evening more has to do with a procedure that we have at our office. It's a therapy, and it's something that you can actually buy for your own home as well. It is called an infrared sauna. Now, I know that some of you might have heard about this before. The infrared saunas that are out there are not as expensive as a cell phone. I've seen people spend maybe $5,000 and $6,000 on a cell phone, maybe even more. And an infrared sauna will cost them not even half that cost online. So if you might be interested in a device like that, there are infrared saunas that can be installed in your home, and they can just fit in the corner of your bedroom so you can watch television while you're doing an infrared sauna. So that sauna causes you to sweat intensely. And this normally lasts about half an hour or so. So you go into the sauna, the infrared light comes on, it's very safe, and it penetrates up to 3 inches below the skin. Well, I should say 2 inches below the skin rather. And that causes a profound, deep tissue sweat. And after 20 minutes of being exposed to the infrared light, the blood vessels of the skin begin to dilate. And that causes blood to rush to the surface to support the cooling process. So then the blood empties its poisons out through the pores of your skin. And so if you want to do an infrared sauna session, you can do so, in my opinion, at least once a week. If you're doing it on a daily basis, you do want to hydrate a lot. You want to drink lots of water before and after, because obviously if you're sweating intensely, you are losing a lot of fluids. So you do not want to dehydrate yourself in the long run. Make sure that you get enough fluids before, perhaps even during, and of course, after a session like that, so that you rehydrate yourself and you don't get the symptoms of dehydration in the long run. Now, the body gets rid of toxins in 4 ways. I told you this in a previous session. There's respiration, there's defecation, urination, and of course, in this case, there's perspiration. Now, I'm telling you this because your body actually accumulates toxins in a host of different ways. We did a session on this already. So perhaps if you have missed that, you can go back into the archives, you can possibly talk to Dr. Richards and maybe get that program. That program was so important because there are ways in which we put toxins into the blood. And those things include high stress, if not managed properly, poor exercise habits, bad diet, indigestion, chemical exposure, constipation, microbial activity, deficiencies, insomnia, and even dehydration. 10 major ways that people can poison the integrity of their blood. Some people experiencing all 10 in some cases. And so you have to be very mindful of that now, because if not, you are toxifying your bloodstream. You're creating a scenario internally that is conducive for the development of sickness and disease in your lifetime. Now, thankfully, God has designed your body to eliminate these poisons in those 4 ways I described, via the skin when it comes to perspiration, via the kidneys in regards to urination, via the bowels, of course, in relation to defecation, and respiration is done via the lungs. So these are the 4 channels and 4 organs of elimination. Now, the interesting thing is that whenever toxins are in the blood, it reverses the polarity of red blood cells, so they begin to attract one another. Red blood cells normally carry a strong negative electrical charge. If all carry a negative charge, they will repel each other because only opposites attract. But toxins have a positive charge. So when they enter the blood, they reverse the polarity of these cells, like I mentioned, so they begin to attract one another. And when you see this happening under a microscope, you see large groups of red blood cells congesting and overlapping. They can't move freely anymore. And one of the ways that you decongest them is to, of course, get rid of the toxins that cause them to become congested in the first place. And that's why you need to sweat every single day. You have toxins in the tissues and in the bloodstream that if you do not sweat on a daily basis, those toxins begin to accumulate and eventually climax at a certain point. And especially on a 24-hour basis, this can be exacerbated I talked some time ago about the major connection between sleeping and sweating. There's a big connection between those two things. When you sleep, the blood gets a chance to detoxify itself. It takes all of the poisons that is accumulated throughout the day, and it actually pushes these poisons into the tissues while you sleep. It does that with the hope that when you wake up tomorrow and you begin to exercise and sweat, the toxins in the tissues are going to come out. So if you're not exercising and sweating every day, toxins get back from the tissues into the blood once again, and then a deadly cycle really overturns itself every 24 hours. So after you sleep, before you go and sleep again the next day, make sure that you break a sweat at some point because you have these toxins in the tissues that need to be expelled. If not, well, then they can cause things like cramps. They can cause eventually things like fibromyalgia and other tissue disorders and skin conditions and so forth, because these toxins are building up beneath the surface of the skin, and these tissues are being saturated with poisons. So you've got to sweat until you're wet. Even if you don't have an infrared sauna, get outside in the sunlight every day and exercise to the point of sweating. And all of a sudden, you will see that blood becomes a lot more improved. You see, the quality of blood goes upward. When you examine your blood under a microscope, it changes radically if you just start sweating every day. It is the primary reason why you exercise in the first place. So, yes, the deep breathing is good and the stretching is good, but you also want to do the aerobic exercises so that you can break a sweat. Even something as simple as walking is a good aerobic exercise to include. So be sure that you don't skip it. Now, for those of you that may not have exercised in a long time, I am a big fan of gradualism. I've said this a million times before. You might want to start with exercising perhaps 5 minutes a day, and maybe eventually go on to 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, eventually 15 and 20 minutes and so forth. You don't have to start with the full hour every day. You can start basically at a small level and eventually get on to the bigger types of exercises. This is not a race. We want to get long-term results. And that goes for anything that you're making changes with, including your diet. Sometimes people make changes in their diet in one day. They say, well, on January 1st, I'm going to eat healthy this year. And then on January 2nd, they follow the bandwagon already because you're biting off more than you can chew. Sometimes you need to start at a low level and work yourself up slowly and gradually. As long as you are going in the positive direction that you want to go in, well, it doesn't matter if you get there quickly or not. The point is you want to get there eventually. And I feel gradualism is the best way. All right. The third aspect of building better blood, the third thing that I want to highlight here tonight has a lot to do with your diet. Of course, I mentioned that shortly ago. Now, when it comes to your diet, I have whole seminars on this subject, really. I've thought so much about this because there are hundreds of diets out there and all of them cannot be correct. And so I spent a long time testing the effects of foods on human blood so we know which ones are truly beneficial and which ones are harmful. And when it comes to food, you have to be very careful about who's defining food for you, because food used to be, by definition, what nourishes the human body. These days, anything you put into your mouth and you swallow and you don't die immediately is called food. So be sure that you be very careful about who's defining that for you. So you have to make sure every time you put something in your mouth, you chew and you swallow, it is improving the quality of your blood. And there are lots of foods out there that actually do this. Now, I believe that God supplies healthy food for his people to keep us looking and feeling young in our lifetime. And the Bible actually says that. The King James Version says, he satisfies our mouth with good things so that our youth is renewed like the eagles. And so we're believing that God will continue to supply healthy foods for his people. I want to encourage you, if you are not familiar with organic farming and growing your own foods, you can do so in your backyard, you can do so on your lawn, you can make use of the barrels that you have not been using, you can cut them in half and you can learn how to plant your own organic foods. You will consume less pesticides, you will eat more food, you will save more money. And the way the world is going in, you're going to have to, as they say, learn to eat what you grow and grow what you eat. And there are many famines all around the world today. And it may very well be at some point we might have a food shortage in the Caribbean as well. You never know. Lots of things are prophesied in scripture that are going to be happening in the world, especially in short periods of time from now. So perhaps you need to start planning for that and make sure that you are growing your own foods. It is a good step in the right direction. It's a good idea. It's something that you're going to have to expose your children to as well, so that you're not spending thousands of dollars every single month buying vegetables all over the place. It's becoming very, very costly now. So be sure that you put yourself in a position to learn about these things. YouTube is a big asset nowadays. Make sure you take advantage of it. It's free of charge anyway. When it comes to food, there are so many foods that cause poor circulation. And I have a lot of material on this subject because when you eat, you are supposed to get more energy. Now, I know that sounds a little strange because normally people, when they eat, they feel a lot more tired than they did before. I know people that eat and then within a few minutes they want to go and sleep. And I know that you know what I'm talking about because there are many persons out there on this call, I'm sure, that have experienced that before. Now, you really are supposed to eat and drink something that is going to increase your energy level by increasing the amount of electrons in your blood. Your blood runs on electrons. In fact, your whole body runs on electricity. Your body is, in fact, a superconductor of electricity. If you don't believe that, well, then put your finger into an electrical socket and see what happens. You'll find out for yourself. If you're a young child listening to this program, I'm just making a joke there, so don't try that. When it comes to electricity or electrons, if you look at something on Google, it's called Kirlian photography, Kirlian. Kirlian photography is a way to measure the electrical content of foods. And when you take photographs of these foods, you can see the electrical fields around them by using Kirlian photography. And so when you are eating foods that animal-based or the fast foods and the processed foods and so forth, you'll find that they don't give you the energy that you want. They actually, if you want to be technical, they take away energy from you. They actually put protons into your blood instead of electrons. So you want to go more plant-based if you want to get more electrons in your blood. Now, we can talk about this all night, but the best way to get more electrons in your blood as it pertains to food is to focus on the green foods. Anything that you put into your mouth and you swallow, once it's green, it is increasing both the quantity and the quality of red blood cells, but it also has a high electron content. Now, when I say green foods, I want to make sure that you understand it's not just green vegetables I'm talking about. You know, there are different types of green foods that you can begin ingesting right now. So one of those green foods, one of those types of green foods is grasses. Now, I'm not saying that you should go and cut your grass and just save the clippings from the lawnmower and start eating that. There are some grasses that are edible and have a very high nutritional content. And they're becoming a lot more famous these days. So things like barley grass and wheat grass especially, and even things like lemongrass and kamat grass. I think these are good examples of grasses that you can use in a supplement form. They normally come in a powdered form, so you can add them to a glass of water, you stir in your drink, and you're getting the benefits of grasses. Grasses and leaves are generally twice as nutrient dense as vegetables. So I think that that is something you seriously want to consider in terms of supplementation. And I'm going to get to supplementation in a short while because there are some supplements that are really good for preventing strokes. We will touch on that shortly. Now, when it comes to these green foods, I want you to get the leaves as well if you can. You can get them in a supplemental form too. Or if you have some of these leaves you're growing in your front yard or your backyard, well, you can put them into your blender and include them in your smoothies. That's fine. There are some leaves that are becoming a lot more famous for their health benefits now, especially moringa leaf. Moringa, which some persons call Saijan leaf. I think that's a good idea, certainly. Those are edible leaves. Olive leaf is a good step in the right direction too. In fact, I remember just a few years ago, I was overseas in Rwanda, Africa, with Pastor Bertrand Beard. And during that time, we were staying at a hotel together. And when we were having dinner, we looked at the menu and we saw cassava leaf soup, which really struck us quite deeply because we love cassava, but we didn't know that we could eat cassava leaves. And when we got the cassava leaf soup, it was blended like callaloo. In fact, it tasted just like callaloo. And when we came back to Trinidad, we started trying this cassava leaf soup. It really was something interesting. You know, many cultures have some great recipes that we can try. So you can eat leaves, or you can blend them, or you can juice them, or you can use them in a powdered format. You can buy them in many pharmacies nowadays. The grasses and the leaves are good inclusions for sure. But of course, you want to eat or drink or even use a powdered form for the green vegetables in general. So more broccoli, more lettuce and cabbage and parsley, spinach, watercress, okra, bodi, karaili, green sweet pepper, asparagus, artichokes, kale, zucchini, avocado, Brussels sprouts. All are good examples of foods that help you to build better blood. If it is green, it is good for building the quantity and quality of red blood cells. So remember that, because if you're putting foods in your blood which don't belong, well, then I showed you a picture a few weeks ago. You can see these dietary structures. They're called protoplasts, and they're very large, and they impede the flow of blood. As blood is trying to flow, well, these structures provide major prohibitions in your blood. So then blood pressure begins to increase because blood cannot flow past these protoplasts easily. And so in order to prevent that, you want to make some good dietary changes. I wish we had more time to talk about that, because diet, we can spend several days talking about this subject. It's so dense indeed. But I think that's the best piece of advice I can give you in terms of green vegetables. Now let's go on to the fourth way that you can improve the quality of your blood and specifically prevent a stroke. Now, that has to do with deep breathing. Now, I say deep breathing because oftentimes I know that when people talk about health, they oftentimes include deep breathing as a part of their regimen. And sometimes people overlook this. They think that it's so frivolous, and maybe they think that they don't get much benefit from it because maybe they don't feel any different just after a couple of minutes of doing deep breathing. But I can assure you, from the standpoint of human blood, blood improves radically when you begin to do the deep breathing methods. I'm going to tell you about a very special method in a short while, but hear me out for a second when it comes to deep breathing. If you want to really do deep breathing properly, one of the best things that you can begin including are essential oils. Now, the Bible talks about essential oils quite a bit in the Old Testament, especially, always in a positive light. And even in the New Testament, these essential oils are quite good and they have tremendous healing properties. These are the oils that the Bible talks about when it says, if people are sick, go and anoint them with oil. And these essential oils are very good for eliminating pathogens, so fungus, parasites, and bacteria. When you inhale these essential oils, they contain molecules that go into the lungs and eventually pushed into your bloodstream and eliminate these harmful creatures that you can see under a microscope. So if you want to use these essential oils while you're deep breathing, you can do the frankincense oil and the tea tree oil, or the spikenard, or maybe even the peppermint oil. I know that some of you know what I'm talking about. You see these essential oils, they come in small bottles in the pharmacies these days. I think that if you want to try them out, it's a good idea. I actually use them on a daily basis. Sometimes even spray them as a cologne. You can use these essential oils and inhale them throughout the day so that you're getting the benefits, not just in a short burst, but over a period of time. So that's great. I also told you a few weeks ago that you could sing as often as you can, because singing is an advanced form of deep breathing as well. You know, God is so generous that while you are singing to Him, He's giving you health. So you might think that the singing was for God's benefit, but God really thinks that the singing benefits you and I. He's not impressed by singing. He gave you the voice that you have. But thanks be to God, He causes us the benefit as we are worshiping Him. And I can talk all day about how the modalities of worship are unto God alone, but somehow benefit man because of God's generosity. That's a whole subject by itself. So make sure that you sing as often as you can. But then thirdly and finally, I want to encourage you to look up the deep breathing methods that there are online. There are so many of them. I am just going to demonstrate one of them, which I like a lot. And I actually learned this from a gentleman online. Wim Hof is his name, and they call this deep breathing method after him. You can Google Wim Hof breathing method, WIMHOF. Wim Hof breathing method, I think, is one of the most advanced of all. So what you do is very simple. You start with taking 30 deep breaths on a quick succession. So you do this 30 times. It will take you a couple of minutes to do. And then when you reach breath number 30, you're going to breathe out. And as you breathe out, before you inhale again, you are just going to hold your breath for a few seconds. So you breathe out like this. And then you hold your breath for about 15 to 30 seconds, as long as you can actually, but at least between 50 to 30 seconds if you can. And then as you let go of that breath, you inhale very deeply now, and you hold that for another few seconds, and then you let go and breathe normally once again. So I think that that is a good idea to drive oxygen directly into your blood. It's a little difficult when you're now starting off to practice these kinds of deep breathing methods if you're not used to it. But that's okay. As time goes by, it'll become more and more comfortable for you. And if you were to practice these methods and you learn them and you have these guides online you're following on YouTube, well, I feel that you're going to take a big step in the right direction for sure, as we always say. All right, so let's go on to, I believe it's number 5 when it comes to increasing the quality of your blood, oxygenating your blood, helping yourself to prevent strokes in your lifetime. And this has to do with walking. Now, I tell my mother this all the time because my mom, she's one of those persons that is very busy throughout the day, so she feels that she doesn't have much time to exercise. Now, I feel that people need to make time, but if you're one of those persons that you feel that you are going and going and you need to do certain things throughout the day and you don't have enough time to do it, well, there is a method that I like to employ that will help you to increase blood flow, decongest cells, and prevent strokes. And that's something that I advise my mom to do as well. I'm giving it to you right now. And that is walk 5 minutes every hour. So time yourself, even if you have to set your alarm on an hourly basis. I want you to make sure you get off the couch or you get off the chair, the office that you sit in all day, or maybe you are a taxi driver and you are driving all day without stopping. You're sitting down for many hours and your circulation becomes very poor. I want you to stand up and walk for 5 minutes every hour. Now that sounds very simple, but if you walk for 5 minutes every single hour, by the end of the day, you'd have walked for over an hour and a half. So for some persons that figure, well, I can't walk for that long, I can't exercise for an hour and a half. Well, if you break it up into intervals throughout the day, it's actually quite simple. So you can employ this method no matter who you are, whether you're young or you're old. We can all walk for 5 minutes unless you have a condition, or else maybe you are elderly and you're not as mobile as you were before, or maybe you have an injury. If that's the case, well, perhaps we can find a different method of circulating blood. But I feel that for those persons that are sitting all day, you are doing yourself a disservice. Your circulation is becoming poorer and poorer every single day. Now, I know that many people sit in an office sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day, and this is so destructive for human blood because if you do this, you're not just going to get poor circulation to your legs, but generally in the human body. So make sure, if you're like me, you're working a job where you're sitting behind a desk. I sit behind a microscope quite a lot on a daily basis. I always have to be mindful between patients. I get up and I go outside, I walk, I do some deep breathing, I do some stretching, I get some sunlight. Oftentimes you don't just get these things anymore. So make sure you keep active throughout the day. Even those of you that exercise vigorously in the morning. I know people that wake up very early in the morning and they exercise at 5 in the morning and 6 in the morning. And I think that's great. But then they go and they sit for the rest of the day. And then circulation becomes poor because you are not mobile, you're not keeping it moving. In order for you to break up the congestion of cells, in order for you to increase the circulation of blood, it has to be done manually. So keep it moving. I was thinking in biblical times, people used to be a lot more mobile because we didn't have cars in those days. So people had to walk to their relatives and walk to their workplace and so on. And for that reason, they might have been less obese and circulation might have been a lot better. And the instances of stroke might be a lot lower. So that's wonderful. But in today's society, we sit a lot, we on our cell phones all day, so we don't get much exercise, including young people these days. They don't play sports anymore. They don't go outside in the sunlight. They prefer to sit on their computer and play video games. And that's very unusual for the human body. It's something that you and I are going to have to train our children from very early on not to go in that direction. And so if you're one of those persons, you're going to have to break that habit gradually and slowly. We all have addictions. Addiction is not a bad thing unless you're addicted to something that is harmful. Sometimes you can be addicted to some very good things. But the more you do something is the more you become addicted to it. And that is where the word habit comes in. The word habit means the next time you do something, it's easier than the time you did it before. So the more you do something is the easier that it becomes. So make sure that you build good habits. The word habit is a very good word if you have good habits, as I often say. Anyway, when it comes to that piece of advice, when it comes to walking, make sure that you cater for it so that you can increase blood flow. Now, number 6, we almost finished, has to do with your bowel movements. Now, I know that many of us don't often consider bowel movements in connection with stroke, but I can tell you firsthand that when it comes to defecation, if you are not defecating every single day, if you are not going to the restroom as often as you eat, well, then you're going to end up with a problem called toxic accumulation. In other words, toxins that are in the bowels eventually get back into your blood and a deadly cycle begins over and over again. And there's a big connection, by the way, between the bowels and the blood. What's in your bowels will eventually affect your bloodstream. And so you've got to be very careful about how you're going to the restroom. A lot of people are suffering from toxic accumulation. Now, you can know this in different ways. I mean, there are people that have symptoms of constipation, and I consider constipation to be if you're not going at least 2 to 3 times a day, well, then you are constipated because people are eating 3 times a day, 4 and 5 times a day, but they're only going to the restroom once a day. And so they're eating a lot more than they're eliminating. And sometimes people have this habit for many years. And in some cases, people don't even go every day. Some persons go once every other day or once every 3 and 5 days. I know patients that go a lot more than that. They go for many, many days without going to the restroom, in fact. And they end up with symptoms. And those symptoms will include some minor ones, of course, like one of those symptoms of constipation might be irritability. Maybe you know somebody that's always irritable. You call them on the phone and say, hello. And you wonder, well, why are you so irritable? Well, maybe because they're constipated and they can't tell you. Maybe they're too embarrassed to say something. But that might be a reality that they're facing right now. Maybe for their birthday or for Christmas around the corner, you can give them a laxative for Christmas so that they can relieve their bowels and they can become a lot more friendly towards you. Maybe that's the problem. Or perhaps you're experiencing another symptom of constipation, which might actually be foul gas. Some of you might be married to somebody, they're passing foul gas right now, maybe your children as well, maybe right in front of you as we speak here in this seminar. Might be very interesting. Well, that's a sign that you have toxins in the bowels that need to be eliminated. So that foul gas, as funny as it might be sometimes, well, the truth is that we have to eliminate these poisons on a daily basis properly, or else it can poison the integrity of your blood. And it can even put you in some disadvantageous positions, maybe even some positions where you feel embarrassed. Perhaps you might be going to the office tomorrow morning and you're in an elevator and it's just you and one other person in the elevator and you feel to pass gas because you're constipated. But you can't do it because there's only one other individual in the elevator with you. So you clench your cheeks together in order to avoid embarrassment, you see. That's a sign of constipation. That is a sign that you need to relieve your bowels. In fact, I saw a man at the office some time ago, and he's a very nice guy. I don't want to give you the wrong impression, but this guy, he might have been in his early 70s or late 70s, somewhere around there. And I recall that during the session where we were consulting with him and doing blood work, he passed gas in a in a violent way. And I remember he became very embarrassed about it. He began to apologize to us. He says, I'm sorry about that. I'm constipated. That's why I came here in the first place. And if you're a practitioner, you don't want anybody to feel embarrassed or anything. So you say things like, well, don't worry about it. And, let's pretend it never happened and all of those kinds of things. And, we moved on from there. But then after a few minutes, he did it again. And this time I couldn't enjoy it. This time I said, you know what? I need to go outside and fill out a form and come back. I left the office door open to kind of air out that office. There's some people that actually put themselves in these kinds of embarrassing situations because of constipation. So be sure that you don't find yourself in that position, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure that you do something to relieve your bowels. If you have trouble in this area, you can consult with us. We have good pieces of advice. I'm going to give you a good piece of advice right now. It's an all natural method. It is a little bit tedious, but I assure you it's going to really help you quite a lot. And that is, you need to get 2 liters of coconut water for this method to work. So you get that geliter of coconut water, 2 liters, and then what you do is you squeeze some lemon or lime into the water. And you don't have to use too much lemon or lime, but enough to improve the taste. For those of you that love to use lemon and lime, I know a lot of persons squeezing lemon and lime into water these days. And if you like to do that, well, you can use a lot if you want to, or if you just want to use a small amount, that's also fine by me. Now, what you're going to do is simple. You're going to drink now just about 16 ounces of coconut water every 15 minutes. So let me repeat that. Every 15 minutes, I want you to drink 16 ounces of coconut water. So in other words, maybe in about 2 hours or so, that bottle of coconut water should be finished. Now, unless you have bowels of concrete, within a couple of hours, you are definitely going to go to the restroom for sure. It's almost guaranteed. There are some persons with bowels of concrete, of course, and those are rare cases. But for the average person, if you put this kind of method into practice, I think that you're going to definitely go into the restroom to defecate. And so if you want to apply that method, if you're constipated or advise somebody in your family to use that method, that's wonderful. It's safe, it's all natural, and it's going to even improve the quality of your blood, because young coconut water especially is nearly identical to human blood plasma. And yes, even children can use it as well. So if you want to use that method, wonderful. Now, if you have a kid, well, then you may not need to drink as much. Maybe half the amount might work for a young child. So you don't want to overburden a child per se, or even somebody that's too elderly either. But for the average person, the average adult, the young coconut water is going to be a very good inclusion indeed. All right, I'm going to give you one last piece of advice. And as we're talking about coconut water, well, that last piece of advice has to do with hydration. In order to increase the flow of blood, in order to avoid strokes in your lifetime, you are going to have to make sure that you regulate blood flow by drinking enough fluids. And this is pretty simple. I like to drink a glass of water every hour, just like I walk around for 5 minutes every hour. I also walk into the kitchen or into the office area where I have my bottle of water and I take a little bit of a drink, just about 8 to 10 ounces or so. It doesn't necessarily be all that much. But I have noticed that if you drink 8 ounces every hour, at the end of the day, as insignificant as that might seem, it adds up to a full gallon of water. So you can actually drink a lot just by putting that small method into practice. That's a small amount of water every hour, a couple of mouthfuls every hour goes a very long way, as insignificant as it might seem. That is going to increase blood volume. It's going to help dilute your blood and increase blood flow over time, and therefore is going to help prevent stroke and regulate blood pressure levels in the long run. So make sure and hydrate. Now you need water that is clean and mineral rich. I talked to you about this previously, and we have that kind of service at our office in Aruka for those persons that have empty bottles. They come to our office and they fill them up, and we charge them less than what they pay for bottled water. And our waters are certified by the government through Kariri to be the highest quality in the country when we first built our systems years ago. And I don't think anybody has overtaken us yet, to be quite frank with you. So it's cheaper than bottled water. You save money, but you get the higher quality water you need. Clean, mineral-rich water. So we're all about saving people money. It's not only about making money. You have to help people. Now, of course, you can also drink other types of fluids. I like the green vegetable juices. I definitely like the herbal teas. Drink herbal teas as often as you can. The Bible says in the first chapter of Genesis, God says, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth. So the herbs are a very good inclusion. If God recommends herbs, well, then nobody can say that they're not beneficial for you. And I can tell you firsthand, based on our blood test, that herbs are absolutely beneficial for human blood. And the more herbs that you use, the better it is. And I certainly do that myself on a personal basis. So be sure and look into something like that. These herbal formulas, these herbal teas are actually quite good. And you may even want to include other types of fluids as well, not just the young coconut water or the vegetable juices or the herbal teas. There are even some low sugar fruit juices as well. And you want to go easy on the high sugar fruit juices. You don't want to raise your blood sugar too significantly, and you don't want to do that too often. But there are some low sugar fruits, actually, like tomato and grapefruit, of course, lemon and lime. Cucumber is really technically a fruit if you want to be technical. And even things like noni. Noni is a good inclusion. I like noni juice. If you use that quite often, it's a little bitter, but they say the bitter, the better. And that's actually quite true. So, by the way, when it comes to noni, I know a lot of people actually allow noni to ferment. They allow it to rot. And sometimes you go to the side of the road and you see these vendors selling noni in a plastic bag, and you see the liquid on the bottom as that noni is fermenting, as it's rotting. I do not want you to do that. Stop eating rotten foods. This might sound obvious, but in the age in which we live in, there's a lot of misinformation. So be sure to avoid rotten foods. Juice noni, I think, is the best way to get noni. And so you can concentrate its healing properties. I feel that's a good step. For all of us, if you want to use that frequently, you can do so. So some of the low sugar fruit juices can be used. That's wonderful. So be sure if you get them, use them as frequently as you can. So these 7 steps that I just wanted to highlight tonight in terms of increasing blood circulation, decongesting cells, regulating blood pressure, and making sure you prevent strokes in your lifetime. So just to recover them or summarize, we want to make sure that we get a lot more fluids every single day. We absolutely want to do the dry brush massage therapies as often as we can. You can do an infrared sauna ever so often as well. You can also make some changes in your diet, especially in regards to increasing the amount of green foods that you consume. You want to do the deep breathing methods. Make sure that you walk throughout the day and you don't become a little too relaxed. You always keep it moving. And finally, make sure that your bowels are always clear and that you don't become constipated. I think these are good pieces of advice. The last thing I would say to you, I know many persons ask this question all the time. What kinds of supplements can I use in order for building better blood, but specifically increasing blood flow and preventing strokes? I just want to mention 3 of them in particular here for you. One is the use of cayenne. You can get cayenne capsules now. I'm talking about cayenne pepper. But for those of you that don't like to eat cayenne pepper, maybe you can't handle it, that's fine. You can get the cayenne capsules these days. Many pharmacies carry these things nowadays, by the way. So you can get them either in pharmacies or online or in natural health stores. That is a good idea. Then I like another supplement called L-arginine. It's an amino acid, and L-arginine is used to increase nitric oxide levels in your blood, and that is called a miracle molecule in science. That's a whole subject by itself. But L-arginine is pretty good for increasing blood circulation radically too. So be sure to use it. Or thirdly and finally, there's another safe and all-natural supplement that you might want to use if you are managing a stroke or you want to prevent stroke, and that is B complex. B vitamins are extremely good for increasing circulation of blood, especially B5. So be sure to get that. Be sure to get niacin if you really want to go in the right direction. Niacin is a very good B vitamin as well. Nevertheless, the B complex contains a range of B vitamins at once. So whether it be cayenne or whether it be L-arginine or whether it be the B complex supplementations, I think these are all good ideas. And if you want to give them a try, they're all natural. I feel that is a very good idea for any person that wants to prevent a stroke. So we're going to leave it there for now. I know we have about maybe 15 minutes remaining. So Pastor Noel, thanks very much for inviting me once again. I believe you may want to take some questions or comments. I'm not sure how the format will work tonight, but if you have some questions that you may not get a chance to ask online today, you can actually message us on Facebook. You can see me. My name is on the bottom of the screen there here on Zoom, but you can also look at that name on Facebook. Rossi Ishmael Khan on Facebook, Rossi. Ishmael is spelled Ishmeel, Khan, Khan, and send us your healthcare questions. And we try to get back to you as quickly as we can. So once again, over to you, Dr. Richards. Thank you so very much once again. I hope you all learned something tonight that you can put into practice. If that's the case, well then type amen in the comment section and encourage us to continue along the vein on subjects like these. Thanks very much. On to you, Dr. Richards.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rossi Khan. Lots of information. I took all my notes, and I trust that everyone was taking notes as well. And what we want to do now is have a time of question. If you have any questions concerning what was shared, you just put your hand up. We will acknowledge you and ask Dr. Rossi to answer your question. Okay, so I see one hand is up already. So let's hear from GB. Joshua, please ensure that they can unmute.
Doctor, just before we have GB speaking, someone asked a question to Dr. Khan. Is hiccuping constantly an early sign of a stroke?
Well, I think it is more of a sign of indigestion or perhaps even gas. And so what you want to do if you are hiccuping quite often, or if you get hiccups ever so often, you look down as low as you can, you bend your neck over as low as you can, and swallow your saliva a few times, and that should calm that problem. Okay, so not to worry, those things are minor. But if you have gas and if you have indigestion, if you don't digest food properly, well, then you can absolutely get hiccups. And for sure, if that's the case, well, I certainly would like you to make sure that you don't just eat the right foods, but you also eat in the right way, because there are some foods that are too difficult to digest in themselves. But even if you were to eat healthy foods, sometimes you can still end up with indigestion if you have poor digestive habits. Things like not chewing your food properly, eating too close to bedtime, eating when you're under stress, poor food combining, drinking highly acidic fluids while you're eating, maybe even skipping too many meals, eating without salads, overeating, microwaving food. All of these dietary habits that people have that cause indigestion. And when you have indigestion, well, what happens is that toxins, or these foods rather, they ferment in the intestines and fragments get into your bloodstream. And these are what we call protoplasts. I talked about them earlier. And these protoplasts, once they get into your blood, it impedes blood flow. So that is what causes the risk of stroke, you see. As blood flow is impeded, well, then certainly indigestion can be considered a major contributor to stroke, at least indirectly. So in one sense, I guess hiccups can be one symptom that you might want to take notice of. If you have chronic indigestion on a constant basis, well, then that can lead to, of course, impeded blood flow and then stroke at some point. But I feel that in a minor way, I don't want to overthink hiccups. Normally, hiccups, more generally speaking, is in terms of gas and indigestion. You have those kinds of symptoms. So I hope that helps.
Okay, let's hear from GB.
Good night, everyone. I really appreciate the information shared. You mentioned, Dr. Khan, that the dry brush method should be at least 3 times a day, right? I want to know how long would you recommend each session be? Should be like you start from your foot and come right up to your heart, and that's one stroke for that part of your body. How long do you recommend each session be?
Well, each session doesn't have to be more than 5 minutes. I think 5 minutes is a lot. You know, sometimes I do just 3 minutes per session. You know, all the blood in the body goes through the heart every 3 minutes. So I think if you want to do the 3-minute sessions, I think that's ideal. And you can do it 2-3 times a day. If you want to go more than that, it's also fine. All right. So I don't want you to overthink it per se. That there's no one size fits all. But I think if you just do the 3-minute sessions ever so often, I think that is sufficient, in my opinion.
And one more thing. I know you said it's a dry brush, but because you mentioned the benefits of using the essential oils, is it possible for you to rub your skin with essential oils and still use a brush? Would that, I mean, it wouldn't be a dry brush anymore, but would it help? Would it be assist in that way in terms of getting the oils into your skin or your pores or whatever?
Well, that's a pretty good idea. But the thing is, some essential oils are very harsh. And so you have to dilute them if you put them onto your skin. All right. If you're inhaling them, that's one thing. But if you apply onto your skin, you want to dilute them in perhaps olive oil or even coconut oil. So you put a few drops of essential oil into maybe a handful of coconut or olive oil, and you apply it onto your skin, rub it together, and that is going to really take the edge off of the essential oils. So you get the benefits of essential oils, but it's not going to really irritate your skin. All right. So if you want to apply it to your skin, wonderful. But be sure to use what is called a carrier oil. If you want to combine the essential oils with that, that is far more ideal. All right.
Okay, thanks, Doc.
No problem.
Minister Jiva?
Hi, good night. Thanks for the information that has been given such far. I have a 10-year-old son, and he don't go to the bathroom regular. It's sometimes every 2 to 3 days. I know you talk about the coconut water. I want to know if he can use it every day, because he drinks a lot of water. He eats and he drinks a lot of water. We normally drink more water than juice, but he tells me that he don't feel to go. So sometime on day 2, day 3 now, he will have an issue. He'll have a problem with going off. So I want to know, what can I do to give him that, make him go off more regular, because I don't have that problem. So to me, that is very strange. So I want to know what advice you have to give me.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, yes, you can use the coconut water method, maybe chop it in half for a 10-year-old. You wouldn't have to drink as much as an adult per se. But more importantly, it's important for people to discover the cause of constipation. Now, this varies from person to person. Let me give you a very simple example of how this can happen. You know, when I was young, my father and I used to make kites. I love to fly kites in the park with my dad growing up. And so we used to take flour and water, and we used to make the paste for the glue for these kites, you see. And people eat that. All right, they eat sandwiches on a daily basis, just to give you one example. So they eat in flour, and that gums up the intestines. And then they drink a cup of tea after that for breakfast, or coffee, or whatever the case might be, or cool kids, whatever. I don't know what children are using much these days. But then when they do that, that is going to create a very sticky scenario internally, and that is going to slow down bowel movements. So that's just one example. I'm not saying that your particular child might be experiencing that. I don't know what his diet might be like. But there are several things that contribute to constipation. For one person, it might be lack of fluids. For another person, it might be that they're not exercising regularly. For another person, it might be they're under intense stress, and that actually affects bowel movements in diverse ways, actually, if you want to be technical. For another individual, it might be their diet. So what you really would want to do is to sit down with a practitioner and discuss the lifestyle habits of your child. And then that practitioner might be able to identify what exactly might be causing constipation in that young person. So you see, I can't say one size fits all per se. Sometimes you have to do a proper consultation to discover it. Of course, these days you really have to find a good practitioner who is willing to sit down with you. Sometimes practitioners are in such a hurry and they want to prescribe something, you know, that unfortunately is the case in some occasions. I don't really like that kind of experience. But what people need more than medication is education. So make sure you get the relevant information. If you want our help, you can always call us at the office, 692-6603. We don't charge for consultations. If you just want to come in and talk with us, it's fine. And we can maybe give you some oral guidance, all right? So not to worry, this is a temporary situation. Anything of this nature can be solved. So by the grace of God, it's just a matter of time before you're out of it.
Good evening. Can I ask a question?
So we have some questions in the chat. One of the questions that we are asking, what is being asked, what the person is saying, is it true while rubbing to the sides of your jawbones can prevent a stroke? Is it true?
Well, I've heard that before. I'm not entirely sure if I have seen any studies on something like that. You know, normally you want some evidence to demonstrate something of that nature. And when it comes to studies, you want peer-reviewed studies, studies that have been reviewed by persons in the field and eventually published in a journal. If that's the case, well, I personally have never seen a study that validates that kind of method per se. But I'm all for attempting methods if they are safe, and perhaps they're methods that are not necessarily clinically proven or tried in a lab, but might be successful. There are many things that I don't know that people used to do perhaps 50 and 100 years ago. Grandparents and great grandparents had all kinds of different methods that they used to employ that might not have necessarily been tested by science, but if it's safe, if it's all natural, if it does you no harm, well, then perhaps you might want to make an attempt to some of these kinds of methods. But nevertheless, when it comes to stroke, I think the best way to go about it if you want to prevent stroke is to practice those 7 things that I talked about. Those are the things that really come to mind if I were in your shoes, if you want to prevent a stroke.
Okay, so we have a few questions. Well, so I'm going to have to ask you like 2 at a time, right? As we look at the time. One question to you is, can we use all 3 supplements? And I'm assuming that this person is referring to the vitamins that you were talking about. And the other question to that is, how would you advise a dialysis patient, especially where we can't consume much fluids? So those 2 questions.
Yeah, well, that's a heavy question, the second one. The first one, with regards to the 3 supplements, the answer is absolutely yes. You can use all 3 together. It's not a problem. I don't think that it's compulsory. Maybe just choosing one. If I had to choose one out of the 3, it would most likely be the L-arginine. The L-arginine has a list of benefits, and maybe a close second could be the B complex, but don't underestimate the cayenne either. I don't take cayenne capsules, but I do use cayenne in general. I use the cayenne powder. I put it on my food all the time. So my food is always red whenever you see it because of the amount of cayenne I use. In regards to dialysis, well, if your kidneys have failed and you're doing dialysis, well, this is a very important type of feature in the human body. The kidneys are designed to filter toxins out of your blood. And so if you don't drink enough fluids throughout your lifetime in order to clear out the kidneys and urinate frequently throughout the day in order to get toxins out of the body and out of your blood, well, then ultimately the kidneys become overburdened because you're not flushing toxins out. And these toxins, if they remain in the kidneys, can cause kidney damage and ultimately kidney failure. And when that happens, well, then people go on dialysis. Now, for those persons that are on dialysis, I don't often talk about this in public because there are methods that people employ when it comes to dialysis that are not necessarily mainstream per se. So I prefer to talk about these things off camera. And so if you're one of those persons that are doing dialysis, you can call our office 692-6603. And I'd be glad to consult with you on a problem like this. It's very, very important, of course. There are some things that are so sensitive nowadays, and people are prosecuted for just talking about, even suggesting certain things that might be really helpful, and that might pertain to things like HIV and things like COVID-19 practitioners are harassed about when giving advice for that might not be in the mainstream, and even things like the dialysis patients that I see quite often at the office. So I prefer to talk about these things off camera per se, but let me just say frankly that there are lots of things you can do if you're doing dialysis to help yourself to recover or at least minimize the effects of kidney damage. So perhaps we can talk about that separately.
Okay, so there's a question as well in the chat. I don't know if it's a question or a comment. I'm not too sure if you would know what this person is saying. And one of the things that they said is, could it be a side effect of medication? I don't know if you know what they're referring to. Another person wants the confirmation. I don't want to answer. I prefer you answer them, even though I know. They're asking if you are saying that the coconut water and the lemon lime would help with constipation. And thirdly, let me stop at those 2 and allow you to answer, and then we can read the rest. There's a few questions, one in the chat.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the lemon and lime, normally lemons and limes are thought of as acidic because they have citric acid in them, but their alkaline mineral content, especially their potassium bicarbonate content, is higher than the citric acid content. So overall, lemons and limes have an alkaline effect, and they contain an abundance of oxygen, by the way, that helps you to eliminate pathogens. So I feel if you want to use lemon and lime often, every single day, And even in large quantities, I think that's perfectly fine, whether it be in your water or whether it be in coconut water, doesn't matter to me. Lemon and lime, I have no limitations on them. I believe if I understood the first question correctly, we're talking about medications, if medications can contribute to stroke. The answer to that question would be absolutely. There are some medications. I mean, you look at TV nowadays and you see certain drugs being advertised, and they have a whole section just for side effects alone. I sometimes want to believe that the side effects are so numerous that they can be even worse than the original problem. So I've seen this quite often, actually. The other day, just as we're on that topic, I saw a commercial, and this might sound unusual, but it's for persons that are losing their hair. And in this commercial, they targeted women in particular, and they're telling women they can use this drug to help grow longer eyelashes, you see. I thought that was so interesting if you want to grow longer eyelashes. But then again, at the end of the commercial, they said one of the side effects is blindness. And so, I mean, you would have longer eyelashes, but you wouldn't know because you couldn't see it. The side effect is even worse than the original problem. So increased risk of stroke is one side effect that is a part of many drugs and steroids, actually. So I guess I would answer that question in the affirmative. Some drugs and steroids and medications in general do increase risk of stroke and other symptomologies that go along with it.
Okay. Another question. Well, 3 questions I'm going to ask one time. What are the benefits of clove tea? That's 1. Can I drink cayenne pepper in water? And secondly, can I use a paddle brush for the dry brush method?
Okay, in regards to clove, I normally use that because of its antiseptic properties. So you can use that particularly if you have a virus. That might be really helpful. If you have a toothache, by the way, there's medical evidence that shows that eating cloves or using clove tea can actually help to reduce inflammation in the gums and help you with toothaches. Of course, clove in general is also antibacterial, so it does help to eliminate some pathogens in the blood, certain types. So I would drink it often if I were you, if we have access to it. In regards to cayenne, definitely you can put it into a glass of water and you can drink it. I've seen people do that. I have tried it before. There's a method to it. Make sure you try not to let it hit the back of your throat, otherwise you can cough. But generally speaking, you might want to put it in your food or use a capsule. If you're not doing it properly, if you're not drinking it in a glass of water, it could be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. And please remind me of the third question again.
Sure. And secondly, can I use a paddle brush for the dry brush method?
The paddle brush. Well, I'm okay with generally any kind of brush, but it must be brushes that have lots of bristles on them, because remember, you want the small bristles so that they're small enough to stroke blood vessels as well. So instead of using 10 fingers, you are getting hundreds of bristles actually stroking the blood vessels and moving blood in one direction continually. So I prefer those types of brushes actually, if I had to choose.
Okay. Your other question is neuro. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Is neuroobine a medication useful for stroke patients?
Well, I suppose.
And can you tell if high blood pressure contribute to a stroke?
Definitely high blood pressure contributes to stroke, and perhaps that person might have come into the Zoom meeting a little bit later on. But at the beginning, I was talking about the fact that poor circulation leads to high blood pressure, and high blood pressure, if exacerbated, can increase risk of stroke at some point. But in terms of that particular medication, I want to be very clear. All drugs are chemical based. And if you're using drugs or steroids, which are chemical based, well, then it interferes with the body's natural processes. So in cases of emergency, perhaps drugs can be used, but if used long-term, habitually, you could invoke long-term side effects. And this is where I become very uncomfortable, because sometimes people don't understand the idea of addressing the causative factors instead of just managing symptoms. Drugs are meant to minimize symptoms. They're not meant to deal with causes. And so if you want to get long-term effects, if you want to get long-term results and prevent sickness and disease, you have to discover what is causing your problem first. If you do not get a proper list of causes in regards to your ailment, well, then you are going to be experimenting on yourself. Even practitioners experiment on patients all the time. I know patients that tell me at the office, well, you know, my doctor ran some tests and they couldn't find what's wrong with me, but they still wrote a prescription. How can you write a prescription for anybody if you know what the problem is? That is malpractice, and it happens in this country every single day. So in regards to drugs, yes, it can cause side effects. Any drug, it doesn't matter what it is. So I want you to be very careful about what you're doing. Make sure and identify the cause first and attack the cause. Sometimes you don't even need drugs to attack the cause. And I feel if you get proper guidance on this subject, you can do really well.
So we have a question. Someone wants to ask you a question. She said, well, the person said it's a bit complicated. Galaxy A30.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you here? You're hearing me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you kindly. I am a almost 64-year-old male. At the age of 19, I suffered this herniation. And what started was apart from the damage with my back was my bowel movements. And I recall going to the medical practitioner, I'll be as brief as possible, and he suggested I increase fiber in my diet. I have seen my bowels shut off and on many, many times in the last, how many years? Some practitioners, with my back, I've seen neurosurgeons, some have agreed that the nerves are so intertwined that one can affect the other. Some have disagreed, and even the medical practitioners, doctor. So to make the story short, in your opinion, I came on when you were speaking about coconut water and diet and so on. What can I do to assist my bowel in moving? Sometimes my bowel shuts off for 3, 4, 5 days, 1 week. And no matter what I eat or drink water, and I drink a lot of water, whether I eat prunes, I eat coconut fiber, whatever, it just, the signal, the desire is not there. Can you give me some answers, some help, please, Dr. Khan? Thank you kindly.
Sure. Well, generally speaking, first of all, 5 things are needed for proper bowel movements: drinking enough fluids, exercising regularly, proper diet, stress management, and the use of specific herbs. All right. We all need herbs. We all need spices, by the way. I have a whole seminar on that and why people should be including these types of things. Now, an herbal formula, I think, at least in the early stages of treatment, might be a good idea. There are herbal bowel cleansers that could be truly helpful for you, and they're safe to use even long term. Now, I can make a recommendation for you off camera if you want us to. That's fine by me, if that's the direction you want to go in. But lifestyle habits are the most important things. Now, I know you said that you are doing a couple of very good things right now, and that's great. But you also want to look very much more deeply than this, because this could also be a sign of something that is happening below the surface. All right. So if that's the case, well, perhaps you might want to take a closer look at that in terms of testing to find out what's really going on. You may even want to do an abdominal ultrasound at some point to see if there are any major issues that you're facing right now. I know some persons are anxious about doing these things, but to me, it's always good to know what's going on. The more you know is the more information that you have to work with. And so once we take the guesswork out of these things, it should be relatively simple, all right? So I don't want you to worry about it. We can provide guidance. I believe you can see some improvements in this area. It's just going to take a little time, a little discipline, and by the grace of God, we'll get there.
Thank you.
All right, welcome.
Dr. Khan, I have just 2 quick questions, and I think we may have to hold on that for tonight because of the time. What causes numbness in your toes and pain at night? That's one question. And the other question is, I think, I'm not too sure to pronounce this, so I'm going to spell it for you. CAROTID ultrasound test tell you if you would have stroke. So they're asking about the CAROTID ultrasound test, if that can tell you if you would get a stroke and what causes numbness in your toes and pain at night.
Okay, first question first. In regards to the pain at night and the numbness in the toes, generally poor circulation can be a big contributor to that. In terms of pain, I often say that there's no pain without inflammation, and there's no inflammation without acid. So we did a whole session on this prior to tonight. We talked about environmental acids, microbial acids, dietary acids, metabolic acids that come from a range of lifestyle decisions that people make. And that, when it gets into your bloodstream, creates inflammation, and inflammation leads to discomfort and painful sensations in the extremities, especially like the toes. So if that's the case, well, then what we need to do is to neutralize and eliminate these toxins properly. And we need to increase circulation to the extremities as well, so that you don't get that numbness, you don't get the cramps, and that kind of thing can go hand in hand sometimes. So that to me is very simple. I mean, if you squeeze your arm as tight as you can for the next 10 minutes, you'll understand why blood circulation is very important. You will feel numbness, you'll feel cramps, and so forth. So blood circulation is a big thing today that I talk about quite frequently, because a lot of people's symptoms can be solved just by increasing the circulation of blood to certain parts of the body. In regards to that specific kind of ultrasound, I guess you could in fact see some contributing factors, especially when different parts of the body are impeded with plaque buildup and high cholesterol levels and so forth. Those kinds of things impede blood flow. So certain tests can pick up that. But nevertheless, I think that generally speaking, you do want to do especially a live and dry blood screening. Those types of tests are less expensive, and they're going to really tell you a lot in the early stages of development. I've shown you pictures about live and dry blood screening very often as I've been here with you in this program and on Men Talk and so forth. And so those kinds of tests are non-invasive. The results are immediate. It tells you quite a lot, especially about your risk of stroke and heart attack. And if you want to make an appointment to have one done, you can actually call our office. We offer these things every day. Once again, 692-6603. I know we said that that might be the last question for tonight. So for those of you that didn't get the chance to ask yours, remember you can add me on Facebook or write me on Facebook at Rossi Ishmael Khan. My name is there on the screen, ROSSI. Ishmael is ISHMAEL, Khan, KHAN. Rossi Ishmael Khan on Facebook, and I'll try to answer your questions there if you didn't get a chance tonight. All right, so Sister Nicole, Pastor Richards, my good friend, Professor, once again, I just want to thank you so very much for having me tonight. I really hope that the congregation tonight was blessed. I hope that you all learned something that you can put into practice and teach your children. At the end of the day, that is what we're looking for. And by the grace of God, we are going to be able to prevent strokes for the most part in our lifetime. Make sure that you take the approach of building better blood. Make sure you drink a lot of water, get enough sleep, exercise regularly, cleanse the bowels every day, use the appropriate supplements, eat a good diet, manage your stress levels properly. These are the basics for building better blood. And I feel that if we were to go in that direction, we would do a lot in the prevention of sickness and disease in our lifetime. So God bless you. And over to you, wonderful pastors.
Thank you so much once again, Dr. Rossi Khan. You have enlightened us again. I have all my notes here, and I know we would have learned a lot of things tonight. I want to encourage you, family, to give them a call. The number again is 692-6603, 692-6603. Perhaps you can make an appointment and check out yourself, find out what's happening in your body. And, it's going to help us to be healthier and to prevent a number of things that, we can get ourselves into if we don't have the information. So please take the number down, 692-6603. Let me just say one thing again concerning the supplements. He talked about three things: cayenne pepper, L-arginine, and B complex. I happen to use a lot of cayenne every day, and I know how important that is. But I want to put in a plug here. There's a supplement that I use and that I sell. So family, I know some of you know it and some of you may not know it. It's called Pro-arginine, and it contains L-arginine. In fact, it has more L-arginine than any other product on the globe. So if you want to get more information on that, you can check me for that. It's called Pro-arginine Plus. All right. And well, I'll have to get into the B complex. Is the B complex and the B12 the same thing, Dr. Rossi? B complex and B12. Mm-hmm.
There are many, many B vitamins out there. B12 is just one of many. And so, yes, you could get a B12 on its own, but I prefer the B complex because you get all of the B vitamins in one. Or if you're using something like a green powder supplement, like maybe wheatgrass, you would not even need to use B complex because it has all the B vitamins in wheatgrass already. So I use a green powder every single day. We have at the office that I use personally. And so if you're using something like that, you wouldn't need a multivitamin or multi-mineral or a protein shake or a fiber formula. It has all of that in one so that you'd have to buy a whole list of different things.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. God richly bless you. We are closing off here for the night, folks. If you found that this session was beneficial, what you can do, we will have shared the link on YouTube, let others know, and so that they too can benefit from it. So God bless you. First Lady, is anything you want to say before we close off?
Only that to let you know, Dr. Rossi Khan, we love you so much. We love you. We love you. We love you. I mean, we are so blessed to have you be a part of our lives on a personal level and even in ministry as well. We just really thank God for you. This is God ordained. So we give God praise. And family, for those of you who are listening, I am putting in a plug. Not that Dr. Rossi asked me to do so, but I really want to tell you all, this man that you see here, a Christian man of God, but also an excellent doctor. If you have never ever had your the blood sample done, where they just take a little prick and yes, and they put it on the and do a test. Dr. Richards and I, we highly recommend him, highly recommend him, and not because he's here, but because we have seen the evidence of certain things that he himself had shared with us, and we see what he saw is so. Please, it's not that expensive to make the visit. Study your health and what's important, and call his office 692-6603. Let him know when you make the appointment from Live Right Ministries, and go and take care of yourself, please. Please don't just let it pass. Call that number and go and take a visit. Dr. Khan, you have an office in the east and one in the south, right? So we have no
yes.
Let me make sure I'm saying the right thing.
Yes, we do. The number in the east is 692-6603. That's the one in Aruca where I practice. But we also have an office in San Fernando, and we have other persons that practice there for us, and that number is 652-5884.
652-5884. Right. So we want to encourage you all to please take the time and go and what Dr. Khan, what he does, which I find to me is really good. He will tell you what is wrong with you. You don't need to tell him. He will be able to tell you what's happening in your body and why you're feeling that way. It is amazing to see. And I'm telling you, you would view things differently after making that visit. And if you still cannot remember the number, we've placed the number in the chat. We also have it in the communication chat on YouTube as well. If you can't remember, just reach out to us and we would be very happy to give you his number. All right, so you have no excuse, absolutely none. Go and take care of yourself, take care of your health. God bless you, each and every one of you tonight. Dr. Richards, do you want me to do the scripture verse or you would close off?
Yes, you close off. Yes, just go ahead and close off.